Welcome to Mark and Ted's History Adventures, where history is all around you. In fact, it's just off the road, waiting for you to discover. With Mark Hall-Patton, the beard of knowledge from History Channel's Pawn Stars, and me, Ted Faye, documentary filmmaker and desert storyteller. Together, Mark and I are hitting the back roads to uncover the untold stories of hidden places and forgotten people. From abandoned outposts to dusty legends, these are the stories you can still walk through, drive up to, and experience for yourself. So, grab your hat and pack some curiosity for an adventure into the real history of the American West. Join us for Mark and Ted's History Adventures.
Well, hello, my name's Ted Faye, and welcome to this new series. Since Gold Creek Films moved to Las Vegas, there's been a real shift in our focus, but not really, because we've always sort of focused on the desert, Death Valley, and the Nevada stories. And now that we're here, I am really excited to welcome with me on this show, Mark Hall-Patton.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. And Nevada stories, got a few for you.
You got a few. But Mark, let's start with you because everybody knows who you are that ever watched History Channel and ever watched Pawn Stars. And you are affectionately known as the Beard of Knowledge.
Yeah, I'm holding on to that. Yeah, I've been called a lot of things over the years, but that one's all right.
That's all right.
Yeah.
But you know what? There's a couple of things I want to know before we get started and we sort of kick this series off. One is, how did you get the name Beard of Knowledge?
Well, it actually came from a Reddit post.
A Reddit post?
Yeah. And apparently somebody put a picture of me up on Reddit. This was years and years ago. And about a page and a half into the comments, there was a couple of kids that said, well, we've got Mark figured out. It's not that he's that smart. It's just that he has the beard of knowledge. And it's been handed down through the ages, and it went on and on. And it was a very funny post. It was a lot of fun to read. And so the next day I was going in to film down at the pawn shop. And before we were filming, we were chatting. And I told Rick and Craig Gottlieb, who was on the show with me. Craig had brought in a pistol, and I was going to talk about whose pistol it was. But Craig was in the scene first, so he was there, and after I told them about this ahead of time, they laughed about the Beard of Knowledge thing, and Rick in the scene said, well, you know what I have to do, because Craig didn't know whose pistol it was. He knew all about the pistol. Rick said, yeah, I'm going to call the Beard of Knowledge, and as soon as I heard him say that, I thought, okay, I'm going to have this forever, and I have, and it's a fun nickname, and so I've held on to it.
Well, you've got a signature look, as they say, right?
Well, I've had the beard since 1976. It's never been off, and I've worn Amish hats since 1986, long before the show. That's just my style.
So here you are, a Western historian, a Nevada historian, and you're wearing an Amish hat. And for all intents and purposes, you could be in one of those buggies in central Pennsylvania, right?
Except for the mustache.
Except for no mustache.
Yeah, Amish don't wear mustaches.
Oh, gotcha.
But you have to understand, I did my graduate work at the University of Delaware.
Okay.
And there were a number of Amish on the Delmarva Peninsula.
I see.
And I thought they had great hats. And so I've always worn Amish hats. Now, the straw hats are not Amish. These are from the Atwood Hat Company in Texas.
Okay.
Happens to be the Nevada style, so that seems to fit.
Oh, yeah, that does.
But the black hats that I wear are Amish made. They're very comfortable. I wear those when it's under 70 outside.
Okay.
And I wear these when it's over 70 outside.
And we're in a warm streak right now.
Yeah, we are.
Right.
But, when you're out in the desert, when you're going out to a lot of the sites that we're going to be traveling to,
right,
you want to keep the sun off your face. You want to keep it off your ears. You want to keep the sun off your nose, things like that.
Right.
it's just a good idea to bring along your own shade.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, two other things I want us to cover is where we are right now. This is the Clark County Museum.
We're at
and
the
you
Clark
used to
County
run
Museum.
the Clark County
I
Museum,
did. I
right?
was here for 28 and a half years.
Wow.
I actually moved over here from San Luis Obispo to create the museum in what was then McCarran International Airport. And then I worked out of this site while creating that museum. And then when my colleague retired, who was running this museum, the county was kind enough to give me all the county museums. So I ran this one, the Howard W. Cannon Aviation Museum, and all the airports here, and a small museum down in Searchlight. Where we are now is on the porch of the Beckley House. This is the home of Will and Leva Beckley. It was built in 1912, and we moved it out here and restored it. We're on Heritage Street. When you come out to the museum, and the museum, it's one of those museums that's hard to find open. It's only open 7 days a week, 9 to 4:30. It's all of $2 to go through. It's a 30-acre site. It's a wonderful place to come to, and I'd recommend everybody come out here if you want to learn about Southern Nevada's history.
There's a real preservation effort, not just seeing stuff and telling stories, but really a sense of what little history is left in Las Vegas. We really want to save it, right?
That's right. And all the structures that are here have only been moved if they could not be saved where they were.
Wow.
And this is all done by Clark County.
So that brings us now to our series, what we're going to do.
Yes.
Right?
And the idea, and we got into this because we've been talking about going out to sites that you may not be aware of, and let you learn a little bit more about the history of Southern Nevada. And the desert areas will probably overlap into California, and probably, we may go into Arizona even. Want to see where the Golden Spike site was on the San Pedro, Los Angeles, and Salt Lake Railroad, or the town of Belmont, or places like this. These are wonderful sites, and if you haven't seen them, we'll give you a chance to see them.
We want to go to places that are accessible, that will not only make the locations accessible, but we want to talk you through and let you know a little bit about the stories, so that the history and the people and the places come alive for you. That's really always been kind of my goal in getting into historical stories and telling these stories and documentaries.
Yep.
Is right, making it come alive for folks.
Oh yeah,
right?
Because when you're telling history, you're just telling stories. You're just telling the stories of people.
Yep.
And that's what's fun about it.
It is fun.
And at least I think so.
I do too.
I've loved doing this, and that's part of the fun of going out to these things. And anybody who's ever driven with me knows, it's one of those things where the arm starts flailing around.
That's right.
Saying, you know what that is?
That's
over
right.
there.
That's right. You know what's interesting is that, and we're gonna close here because we want you to join us on location here. But one of the things that is interesting is once you begin to understand the stories and the people, you don't drive through that empty desert the same way.
No.
When I was driving the other day from Vegas to Reno, right? And people say, oh, this endless wasteland of desert that you drive through. And I'm looking out there and I'm going, well, over that trail, that's the roadbed for the Carson and Colorado Railroad. Over there, that's where they mined borax in the 1880s. And gosh, there was a big silver rush there, and there were prospectors and burros and wagons and freight wagons and trains. And you see all this stuff out there.
Yeah.
Maybe some people think we're nuts, but it's fun nuts, right?
Yes. Well, I do that. I do that driving back and forth on the 15.
Yeah.
People think that's one of the most boring drives. It's like, no. The first water park in America is right off the 15.
Right.
And things like that. You go, but all of this is right here. You can see it as you drive by. And anybody who goes with me, they go, okay, Mark, we got it. But then it's like, I didn't know that. Well, yes, and now you're going to see it every time you drive by.
So that's what we're excited about. That's why we decided to start this little series and telling the history of interesting sites, and we're excited to do that. So, Mark, we should probably just maybe get on the road at some point.
I think we ought to do that. So we'll see you there. Come find some history with us.
In the next episode of Mark and Ted's History Adventures, an oddball desert artwork points the way to a forgotten railroad connection that helped shape the West.